everyone, today on the plastic canvas we're painting a Nightgaunt from Mansions of Madness. From the plastic canvas, and welcome to another Mansions of Madness miniature painting video. Mansions of Madness is a co-op exploration game where players take on the role of paranormal investigators, going to different locations to investigate some paranormal activities. Absolutely love this game. Very, very thematic. Got a horror, sort of Lovecraftian Cthulhu type theme going on. And there's a really, really good app that goes along with it to keep track of the, or to tell the story and to keep track of the stats of the enemies and the playable characters. So being a horror themed game, we've got our bad guys that you can go up against, and our Nightgaunt here is one of them. In the base is a card that goes along with each of the characters, so numbers that are referred to in the game, it's got their name, and then also on the back it's got some text, just an ability that they can do, and some flavour text. And for our Nightgaunt it says, "This faceless winged creature has rubbery skin and a barbed tail. Its strange keening cry is unsettling." And I don't know if I'll be able to with this one. No, card's not going to come out. On this face of the card in there, it's got some artwork to show what the creature looks like, and then there's a little sort of hook just here on the base, so that if you don't want to have the card inside, you can sit it up there and sort of see what it looks like. But yeah, so this is our Nightgaunt. Hasn't been touched yet. So first step's going to be priming. Like I've been saying in the other ones, go and check out the start of the Sci-Fun video from my Zombie 15 series to find out why I'm using a brush-on primer as opposed to spray-on. I won't be sticking with a brush-on, but there is a bit of an explanation there about it. And yeah, so just going to get into that first step, paint our Nightgaunt, then he or she, either, will have about 24 hours or so for the prime to properly bond to the plastic, and then we'll get into doing our base coat. Just quickly for those playing along at home, this is one of my original brushes that I got. I've never actually painted a mini with this brush in particular, but it came in the first pack of brushes that I got. I worked out pretty quickly that these are absolute rubbish, but these have been good to keep around for things where it doesn't matter if the bristles get ruined. I'm painting this with a size 8, and this is the only thing that this brush gets used for, just because it has good coverage. Just helps to speed up the process of priming. So yeah, size 8 for priming these. I mean, these minis aren't too big compared to my paint dropper, there we go. So they're on the smaller side, but yeah, bigger brush just helps to speed things along. Just quickly while I'm priming this guy, I'd be interested to hear from people if you strictly, like if you're someone that paints with or primes with a spray-on primer, which I'm guessing is going to be the vast majority of people, if you strictly prime with a spray on, or if you have a brush on as well, because just while I'm priming this guy, there are some spots that even with a brush really quite tricky to get to, like up underneath the wings and a few details like that. I don't even know, like with a spray on, how you'd really get it in there and get good coverage in there without absolutely drowning like some of the areas around it. So I'd just be interested to hear if you, like if for a mini like this, if you also have a brush on primer and you would use a brush on for something like this where it's harder to get into some of those spots, or if you just strictly use a spray on, and if there's just a way to work around that, because as I move away from a brush on to a spray primer, that'd be something that I'd be interested to know. Alright, so the prime's gone off for our Nightgaunt, so now we're up to base coating. Now working sort of straight off the artwork, like so much of the rest of Mansions of Madness, it's lots of greys and browns, which is definitely not something that I'm sort of really taken with this game. Gameplay wise and all that, absolutely love it to bits, but purely in terms of the artwork, it's done to a really, really good standard, but it's just a sea of browns and greys. If we take out the card from the base here, if I can get it out, there we go. Yeah, you can see there, it's pretty well all grey. I mean, the only interest in the artwork is a bit of the OSL going on from this sort of greeny glow coming from this side of the image, but in terms of the Nightgaunt itself, it's just all grey. So I'm going to be, I'll stick with the grey for most of the mini, just to stick with the theme of the character, because it does say this faceless winged creature has rubbery skin and a barbed tail. Its strange keening cry is unsettling. But I do want to break that up a little bit and add a little bit more interest to it. So what I want to go for is just sort of looking at the claws and the feet and the horns, just thinking that these are the parts of the mini that would sort of probably be doing most of the damage. I want them to look like they're like a hardened sort of, not material, but that they're just a bit of a hardened, more surface than the rest of the mini. So I'm going to do them in black, so the hands with the claws, the tips of the horns, the feet, and I'm even thinking the end of the tail just in there. Do them in black and then wet blend them through to a grey for the rest of the body, just so that that'll differentiate the hands, horns and feet as being a different, yeah, we'll just go with material, yeah, to the rest of it. Like this will be skin and this is something harder. And then I'm a little undecided on what to do for the end of its face, I suppose. It kind of looks like hair hanging down. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be. Even from the artwork, it's hard to tell as well. But yeah, so I'll decide on something there, maybe like a purple or a blue or something like that, just for something a little bit different. And then for the wings, just the parts in between these ribbed sections, I'm thinking I'll start with, to make it look like it is like a sort of skin type of thing, I'm going to start with a skin tone up at this end, and then blend that through to probably a brown down at this end, just so it'll have some sort of gradient, but it will look like it's a skin tight, leathery sort of surface. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to go for with our Nightgaunt. So stick with the grey, which is what's in the artwork, but add a little bit of variety in there in the hands and the feet and the horns, and then in the wings. So yeah, we'll get into doing that. Alright, so just quickly stopping at that point there, as a first coat, I'm happy with that blend that's going on there. So, because it's quite warm today, I started off without any drying retarder in with the paint, and I saw actually how quickly it started to dry on the wing. So I mixed some drying retarder in there just to help thin it out, but then also give me more workable time to get that blend happening. But what I also mixed up was, so I used my, so these are the two tones here that I'm doing the blend with. So I've got my tan skin, which is my skin tone, muddy brown, which is my brown, but then on my palette, so I've got a drop of each of them, but then I mixed a third drop together which has a bit of both in it, so that acts as like a transitional tone. So rather than just trying to literally blend the tan skin into the muddy brown, what there actually is in the middle there is a third colour which is a blend of the two already, just so that you know, not trying to take two colours that are a bit too different and just forcing them together. So it just helps with that blend through the middle there. But yeah, so happy with how that's looking, and as you could see, the direction that I was blending with was perpendicular, the brush work was perpendicular to the direction of the blend, so the blend's working from this end down to there, so I'm working that way with my brush to get that smooth sort of transition happening across. So yeah, so just going to go ahead and do this wing now too. Just also quickly, while I'm thinking of it, I'm doing this skinny part of the wing before the ribs, because the ribs go over the top of the skin part, so it's just easier to paint the rib parts over the top of the skin part rather than trying to paint the skin part in between these, but still in these three different segments here, try and get that same blend. So just working from the lowest layer up to the top. So base coat done there for the top parts of the wings. Underside of the wings, because they're going to be seen very little and they're in the shadow, I'm just going to do them in just straight brown. I'm not going to put the time in there for that blend, because that's what's going to be seen on the board. That underside there, not so much. So yeah, so just going to use the brown that was the muddy brown, which is the darkest parts down the end, just straight underneath. Quickly, all I did there was I went back and just re-blended through the middle section of the wing. I just wasn't happy with how sharp there was quite a sharp line between the lighter part of the wing and the darker part, and I just wanted that blend to happen a little bit more gradually. Really happy with this side, and I think because I've got a good blend happening on that side, it showed up a little bit more there, so I've just gone through and yeah, just re-blended that just so it's a little bit more gradual, and yeah, that's looking a lot better, so happy with how that's looking now. So now just going to get on to the rest of the body. Sorry at the moment if you guys are getting some really weird camera angles. There's some really tricky parts to get to with this guy, because I'm trying to not hit the wings, like trying to get to that part of his arm right in there and just weaving the brush in just wherever I can to try and get to everywhere. So yeah, so sorry if we disappear out of shot or if it's a bit of a funny angle. I will try and bring it back as quick as possible. But yeah, some of these angles are, or some of these parts of the mini, sorry, are a bit tricky to get to. Just for these horns, I'm just going to bring in a bone colour, just so the grey will blend into the bone colour, which will then go into the black, so just skeleton bone. Just to give it a little bit of differentiation from the claws and the feet, just because at the moment I'm just thinking it's going to look a little too same. So yeah, so just to set it apart a bit from the claws and feet, just to show that it is something different. Yeah, just a little bit of bone colour just to set it apart. Just two good bits of advice that I picked up along the way from watching videos and listening to some podcasts and that, just on brushwork, is use the biggest brush that you can to do the job. So for the whole mini so far, I've been using my regiment sized brush. Now I'm not sure exactly what this translates to in terms of number size, comparing to my maybe my 4, no. So I've got a 4 here from my first set. Now these are pretty rubbish, so I don't really trust the sizes, but just looking there, actually it's not wildly off a number 4, so it's probably about a number 3. It's definitely bigger than my number 2 brush from my original set, so we'll call it a 3. So far I've painted the entire mini with a number 3, including the line work there on the ribs for the wing. So even though, you know, I've been painting these broader sections, doesn't mean that you then have to just go and swap straight to like a 0 or you know, like anything smaller than that to do that line work there. When I first started painting, I did the opposite of what I do now. I used the smallest brush that I could to do the job, because I thought, oh, they're miniatures, so you want to use a small brush, but that just makes it take longer, and you're just making the job harder for yourself. And then once I swapped to that mentality of just use the biggest brush that you can to get the job done, it's just made it a whole lot easier. And then even with something like that, you know, I didn't swap down to a smaller brush, just kept it the same for the line work there. But what I did do though is, you know, for everywhere so far, I've been painting normally, so just using the tip, you know, just the normal way that you use a brush. But for these ribs here, because they're raised, instead of using the tip and painting in a normal fashion if I try and get that angle a bit better, instead of using the tip and just painting normally, which can what happen is if you put a bit too much pressure on, the bristles will roll around the edge of that raised rib in this case, and then you can easily paint onto sections that you don't want to. So what I did is I just got paint on the bristles like normally, but then I used the side, if it comes into focus, the side of the bristles. So here where it's going to be hard to show, but where the rib is raised, what I'm then doing is painting along using the edge rather than the actual tip. And what that means is that it's a whole lot easier to just catch that raised section and not spread it down to somewhere that you don't want it. So those are two good things if you haven't heard them yet. Paint with the biggest brush that you can to get the job done. And if you're going to be doing, this is essentially edge highlighting what I'm doing here. Just use the side of the bristles rather than the tip. It'll get you a sharper line. Alright, so there we go, there's a base coat done on our Nightgaunt. So just a quick couple of things that I'll mention there. Originally, I spoke about doing black on the tips of the horns. So I brought in the bone there to differentiate it from the claws and the feet. But then I sort of accidentally put the bone up to the tip of the horn, and I thought, actually, I don't mind the look of that because that really differentiates it from the other parts of the mini, but also it gives a focal point to look at. So you've got the wings there, which are quite a bit brighter than the rest of the body, and then you've also got these horns that stand out. So it gives you somewhere to look at, somewhere to draw your eye straight away. And then just for these hair or whatever it is that's coming down here, I don't know what it is, I went with purple, partly because I'm also painting a deep one at the moment, and I've done a bit of a similar look with this one to the deep one, where the main part of the body is grey, and then parts of it blend out to black, but parts of it also blend through to blue. So I wanted to go with a different colour to what I'd used on the deep one, so that there was something about it that was a bit different. And so I went with purple, which is a bit of a nightish kind of colour. I don't know, I think it looks alright. It's not really a part that gets seen that much anyway. Alright, so you're going to let that dry, and then I will come back and do a black wash over the body, which will then let me do a bit of highlighting, and I'm unsure as to whether I'm going to touch the wings. I'm kind of happy with how they're looking, so I might leave them and just do a bit of a dry brush highlight. But yeah, I'll decide that while everything's drying. So yeah, so we'll come back after that, and I'll do the washes to get some shading happening. I'm just quickly jumping back in while it's drying. I thought this would be a good time to put the prime down on the base for when I do put the earthy, grassy kind of look on it that I'm doing with the more creature looking minis in this game. So I've just got my brush and primer just mixed in with a bit of water, and I'm just going to put that down around the feet of the Nightgaunt, so that when I do paint it to give it that grassy, earthy look, the paint isn't going directly onto the plastic. And like I've done with the rest of them, I'll give it a bit of a curvy sort of edge, so that as it's painted, it gives the illusion that it's going beyond the limits of where I've actually painted. So I'm just going to jump in and do that step now, just while the paint's drying. Alright, so now that that base coat is dry, it's time to do a wash. So this is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to use Seraphim Sepia on the horns just to knock down the brightness just that little bit, but then give it a little bit more of a bony look by just sort of dirtying them up a little bit. And then it'll just be a Nuln Oil over the rest of the Mini, and that'll really blacken the feet and the claws, help with that blend from the black through to the grey, and then also dull the grey a little bit so that as I highlight back up, it'll give a good bit of a contrast. And I'm thinking what I might do just with the wings is I might just use some Agrax just at this end, just at the darker end, and then just kind of blend it up, just to give a bit more contrast between this end of the wings and up here, just to really sort of push that contrast. So yeah, so that's just the next step. So all those washes have dried, and now it's sort of deepened the colours, darkened everything off. So now as I do some highlighting, that'll build a good bit of contrast. So the first step with the highlighting, a good way that I've found to do it so far, is just to bring everything back up to the base colour in the spots where light is going to be hitting. So like with all the grey areas, for example, you know, it's sort of been knocked down to a darker grey. So I'm going to highlight first of all with the grey that I used as that base colour, which I think was, yep, just cloudy grey. And then I'll lighten that off with a bit of white to get a lighter grey, and then use that in the spots where, you know, the higher concentration of light's going to be hitting. So bring it back up to the base coat, and then sort of gradually lighten it off from there. Yes, there's not going to be too much here because it's mostly grey. So yeah, so we'll get that highlighting going on, and then we'll get on to doing the base. some highlighting done on our Nightgaunt. Now just quickly, one thing you might have picked up on, but I will point it out, is that I went back and I redid the blends on the wings, just because when I put that wash down the bottom end of the wing, blending up through, it did what I wanted it to. It darkened off this end, so it sort of brought out the contrast a little bit more, but where sort of I thought the wash kind of ended, where I thought I'd feathered it out okay, it left a bit of a line, and I wasn't happy with the way that looked. So I redid that. Now I did it in the exact same way that I did the first time around, so I didn't bother recording it again, because you've already seen it once. The only difference was that I had to do it in 3 different sections rather than being able to do the whole thing in one go. So it wasn't as easy, but I'm much happier with the way that this looks than how it did with the wash. So yeah, a little thing sort of to keep in mind for next time. Don't put a wash over blends. So yeah, with the highlighting, obviously, the way that I try and highlight is I focus a lot on blends and feathering when I'm highlighting. So lots and lots of layers, and each layer just gradually lightening until it gets to like the brightest point that I want. And what I sort of want the focal point with this, with the Nightgaunt to be, is the top of the wings, which will then sort of draw the attention to the blend happening in there. So I ended up working right the way up to pure white at the highest point there, which then just feathers out. And similar thing, just like at the top of the sort of the shoulder blades there, it's not pure white because I want these 2 points here to be that focal point, but it gets close to white up there, and then yeah, just picked out some of the claws just with some starting with a really dark grey and working up to a light grey there. One thing that I've really found when highlighting that kind of sells it a bit is just that real contrast. So you know, if you look at like the grey down the bottom here of these sort of ribs, you look at how dark that grey is there, and then it works up to pure white. So it's a really strong contrast. It's not like a medium grey through to a light grey, it's a dark grey through to white. And I just find that by building that contrast, that just sells those highlights a little bit more. But yeah, so happy with how that's looking. So now I'm just going to go on and start doing the base. So it's already been primed there, ready to paint. So yeah, being one of the creature sort of looking characters, I'm going to do a earthy, grassy sort of look, as opposed to the cracked stone look that the people are getting. So yeah, so just going to start with a base of brown and mix in some different shades of greens and a little bit of yellow as well to create a bit of a grassy effect. And then when that's dry, so I'll do all this without stopping, so when that dries, I'll then come back and more deliberately pick out where some of the grass will go, because as the paint is wet, it will blend together, which is fine, but then when I want more defined sort of grassed sections, come back after it's dry, do that. And then when it's all dry, then I'm going to stick down some tufts of grass to make it look like the Nightgaunt is walking through the grass. But to get that grassy look, I'll be using, where is it? So just one of my old brushes here. So to get kind of individual looking blades of grass, I'll just flare out the bristles. This is just one of the older ones where it doesn't matter if I don't look after the bristles so much. And then by having the bristles flared out like that, it gives individual, come into focus, there we go. It gives individual points, so that will just help with getting those sort of more individual looking blades of grass. So yeah, so that's going to be the next step. Alright, so our Nightgaunt is finished. Another Mansions of Madness mini ready to go into the box and go up against our paranormal investigators. So just at the end there, you would have seen me playing around a little bit with these Tufts of Grass, just trying to get them sort of in the right spot. I've got a couple of different sizes going on here. So I've got a large one here and then a medium one there and then a couple of smaller ones. I went with more Tufts than what I have been with minis in the past because just with the Nightgaunt on its own, because it's not really a super detailed mini, and because the colour scheme that I went with is quite monotone, him just on his own, it was just a little too sparse looking. Didn't really have the impact that I wanted, and so I went with a little bit more denseness with the grass just to kind of sell that look a little bit more and just to fill it out a bit more, and sort of in the end I'm really happy with how that's looking. It sort of really gives the impression that, you know, this guy's outside, he's kind of coming in, creeping in, yeah, so that's sort of given the look that I wanted to, but without that grass it was just a little bit too sparse, just with that quite neutral colour scheme that I've got going on there. A couple of things I'm really happy with this guy. The contrast that I got with the highlighting, especially from the top of the wings down to the bottom, going from that really sort of bright white down to that much darker grey. Really happy with how that's looking, and yeah, the blend with the wings there gives a good focal point up there, somewhere to sort of draw the eyes, and I think sort of on the table that'll have quite a good impression. But yeah, so happy with how he's come up, and yeah, another mini ready to come out into the game. So yeah, thanks very much for spending some time watching me paint up this guy. As always, I hope you've gotten something out of watching me paint, something that you can take away and use in your own painting, or just at the very least, you've just enjoyed watching me paint. As I always say, please do leave a comment down below, something that you liked about the video and something that you think could be improved, just so I can keep making these videos as good as possible for all you guys to keep watching. And yeah, if you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe so that you can keep up to date with as these videos come out. But yeah, not much more to say than that. So this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.